Hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 of our Bumblebee tutorial. So as you can see, we've got most of the body sculpting done. I've also painted the inside all black. I had a little bit of downtime and I just wanted to do something easy. The next thing that we are going to do is work on doing the roof, the windshield, roof, and windows. So to do that, the measurements will be different for you guys. Now that we have our body mostly sculpted, we can move on to building the backpack portion of the costume. Otherwise, what it serves as the windshield, roof, back window, and side windows of the car. One thing that I've noticed in all of the other Bumblebee costumes that I saw, more often than not, they make the back way too high. It gives a really weird look to the car, kind of like a cartoon character, or very bubbly. So that's you want to pay attention to that. Depending on the measurements of your costume, what I like to do is the windshield is going to go about halfway to the door line. So that's going to slope up, and it's going to slope. You want a nice, pretty aggressive slope because it is a sports car. And we would stop somewhere just shy of halfway. Now the height, once again, we turn to ratios. Now, in my case, the bottom of the body of the car, not to the floor, but to the body up to here, is about 7 inches. So I don't have an exact measurement, but I find that the sweet spot for the height of the roof is somewhere between 1/3 and 1/4 of this height here. Now to do this part, it's probably a good idea to actually install the wooden frame. Now you'll notice that I put this little piece here. This is just a guide that I put in to help hold the cardboard in place as I'm working with it. I just tacked it into place, but that's something that we're going to remove later on. Now I decided on a height of 2.5 inches, which happens to be exactly 1/3 of the measurement of here. So if we take this section and divide by 3, that's going to give you the measurement more or less of what the height should be. In terms of distance, this entire length of the door here for me is 10 inches. I went 4 inches, so just under half. But that's generally the area that you want to go. Once we're happy with those measurements, then all we need to do is some basic high school math. If any of you are familiar with the Pythagorean theorem, so a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So if you do that little calculation, that will give you the appropriate measurement for your windshield. Once we have that, we can go ahead and cut a piece. Now we'll start with a piece of cardboard that is going to be the width of the wooden frame, not any wider than the width of the wooden frame. I've bent a section here, and you'll see this little holder here will help keep the cardboard in place as you're fiddling around trying to figure out your pieces. So you can just tape down the front, fold it over the holder, and somewhere where this door line finishes, where along this door line here, not here, not here, but just where the rear fender starts, we also put in a series of bends just to get an idea of what kind of curve we want. I have this piece a little bit longer, so I can kind of fiddle around and decide what kind of a curve I want in my roof line here. So once we're satisfied with the general height and curve of the roof line. I just put a little bit of tape to hold everything in place. If you find the tape is not effective enough, you can always glue that section as well. For this, this is actually a rough copy. Once we get all of the measurements figured out that we want, we're going to take this and put it onto another fresh piece of cardboard and make our good copy. Last thing that we need to know, however, is we take a measurement. Now it's not going to be straight up because you can see this part is wider than the roof. So we just want to take a measurement to see how big that cardboard is. And what we want to do, we want to measure from the top of the wood to the roof line. So whatever your measurement is, write that down because we're going to use this to make our good copy. We can take this off of the frame. This is our rough copy or our stencil. So we take our rough copy that we use to determine some of the basic measurements, and we take another fresh piece of cardboard and we will overlay it on one big piece, and then we mark out where the windshield is, the roof, the curved section of the back, and the back window will be somewhere here. This part is flat. You'll notice that I have little flaps on the back and the front, and those are there just to help me attach the entire assembly onto the actual frame. These are the side windows. I left myself a little extra pieces here. You'll see why in just a second. So how do we determine the measurements? If we take our frame, the front of the windshield is the width of the shoulders. The actual roof line will be skinnier than the bottom of the windshield, and you determine that by determining the width of the back of your frame. The windows here, you determine that, a couple important measurements. The windows, you know when you had the frame like so with your rough copy, and then you just folded it down, so that will, because these are on an angle, so those are the sides there. These angle pieces here, this is an important part. They need to be the same length as the length of your windshield angle here. So if I measure here in my case it's 4.5 inches, I just pivot the ruler and draw a line. These two edges need to be the same length because we're going to be gluing them together. I like to glue on this edge and tuck that underneath so that the windshield is as smooth as possible. You'll have a seam here, but that's something that we can hide later with a little bit of caulking. I call it silicone. It's actually caulking, and make sure it's paintable caulking. It will be covered with paint when we paint the actual posts. A couple folds that we need to do. So you do a fold here from the windshield, between the windshield and the roof. We do a bunch of folds here, so we have a nice curved piece in our roof line, and we also fold here. We'll go ahead and glue here. So once we have that part glued in, we're going to attach this tab on this part of the frame here. Now the width of the tab, that will be determined by the width in between these wood sections. You'll know it's a little bit lower than the rest, so this tab will fit quite comfortably in there. You can use this, make sure you line up the rear section as well so that you make sure that everything is straight. But once that's tabbed into place, we can start gluing the cardboard to the edge. Now we're not actually going to put it to the edge of the wooden frame itself. We're going to be gluing on top of the frame. The reason that we're doing that is because we've already measured the other pieces and we need clearance between the doors, so we don't want to add any extra width this way. As far as gluing, we're only going to go as far as the straight section. We're not going to be gluing the, what do you call that, the narrow section or the tapered section just yet. These angle pieces that we cut, that should be aligned with where the straight part of the frame finishes. We can mark that off for ourselves. When we're applying the glue to this bottom of the cardboard, we're going to stop wherever it was that we marked off. When you're gluing, you can also go ahead and glue these edges here. So with our back piece glued into place here with that tab underneath, we've got a pretty rigid structure at this point. Everything is attached all the way to here. The only thing that's left are these little flaps. Now I don't have any magic formula at this point. Since everything is stuck and rigid and glued in place, I basically just manhandle the last two parts. What I'll do is I will push everything down as much as I can. I'll do one side first. I'll just push it along the frame and here all the way to the edge, and then with a really sharp pencil I'm just going to mark where that edge is, here and here, and we've got our lines drawn and we're just going to cut that piece out. The reason we draw from the inside is just like the windshield goes on top of the windows, we much prefer to have the cardboard corrugation pattern showing here rather than on the top. So these need to tuck inside. So we cut off that big piece on the bottom, and that already makes life a lot easier. Now, because of this being tapered, when you fold this in, the actual piece is on an angle. It's not straight. If you guys can figure out an easier way to do it, please let me know. But that works pretty well. So once everything's together, we end up, this is our finished piece. We've got the windshield, we've got the side windows on an angle, we've got a roof line that follows the line of the rear window, a little bit of tapering here on the back. I went ahead and just put in extra glue all the way around from the inside to make sure it doesn't come apart. Once we're done that, we just have to clean up all the edges. We can do that with a little bit of sandpaper or a sanding block, and afterwards we'll put a little bit of silicone. You only need to put silicone up here. You can along the bottom, although it's not really necessary. Not too many people are gonna see that part of the costume. And once we're done that, we can move on to constructing the hood. We're gonna do the construction on the hood opening, or the engine opening. And if you remember in our earlier video, I told you guys to save these pieces. These pieces are what we were left over with from when we were cutting out the cardboard for the front fenders. Now this curve should be the same curve as the curve of the hood. We're going to use that as a frame for the hood. What we'll do is we'll line it up on the back here. Now we don't want the hood to go all the way to the bottom. I usually give myself about a ½ inch. We're going to cut that about ½ an inch, and then we can use this to make the rest of our pieces. So we'll get another piece of cardboard. We want, what I do is I have this part of the hood elevated probably about ½ an inch. We will line up this corner to that corner there after we measure, and we're just going to rotate this piece so that these 2 points are touching, and this side is lower, and once we have that lined up, we go ahead and draw ourselves a line. This is essentially the piece that we're going to cut out. We're going to need 2 of those. Now I use this method for building the hood only because it guarantees a fully functional and 100% reliable hood every time. What I've seen with most other costumes is all they have is a flat piece or just a single piece of cardboard, which does a pretty good job of covering the hole. But more often than not, what happens is when they transform, it flips back, and that's it. It doesn't automatically fall back, which is a problem. I've seen a couple others where they might use strings or elastics, but I find that kind of ruins the look of the vehicle because the elastics end up sticking out sometimes. So it's not really cool. So we're going to go ahead and actually build molded or sculpted, I guess, or shaped hood. And once we finish building it, you'll come to appreciate why I believe this is the best approach. You'll get a perfect transform every time. So we've cut out the flat piece for the hood. We've got our 2 side frames, and you'll also need one more piece like this. This one is the same height as these guys are high. I've also matched the opening here, and everything overlaps on the sides. It overlaps by 1/2 inch, and on the front I overlap about 1 inch. I go a little bit longer on the front only because when you're going to be doing your possible adjustments to get your transformation right, this is going to be attached to the windshield. So if you move the front end forward, the hood is not going to move with it. So I like to go as far as I can, leaving myself still about 1/2 inch there and 1 inch of overlap underneath. I've also bent this piece, so you'll see it does have a curve. It might not be the exact curve, but that's okay. We're going to establish that as we start building. So once we have this back piece put in, leave yourself little notches. We can go ahead and start putting in the curved pieces. These ones can be a little bit tricky because they're very thin and you don't want to break them. So I do a little bit at a time. Oh, you want to make sure you get some glue in there as well. And what I'll do is, while the glue is still warm, I will put it right on top to make sure that as it's drying, it's actually forming or following the form of the hood. You could do it all in one go, but sometimes because this part is so thin, the glue will go underneath and glue straight down onto here, which can be a problem. You can fix that, but why go through the hassle if you don't have to? And then we'll just continue gluing along those edges. Make sure there's nothing leaking from the bottom, and then just push it and hold it down, and that will give you your final form. So we've got our frame made. You can see it fits very nicely with the rest of the existing front fender. If there's a little gap, it's not a big deal. Now once you put everything together, this extra structure also will give your muscle car that little extra beefiness, making it look like it's got a really big engine inside, which is a byproduct. But really the most important thing is we need to have an actual structure, a little bit more than just a flap. And the reason why we need, so once you finish that, then just go ahead, clean up the edges, trim off whatever you can, sand it smooth, and then do caulking along all of the exposed cardboard edges. Sand, caulk, and you're ready to go. Now, the reason why we made it the way that we did If you used Velcro here, then we're going to go ahead and add Velcro here to attach it. I didn't feel the need for Velcro, but basically when we're doing the transform, this structure lets the hood open this much and not any further. One of the problems with all the other costumes that I've seen out there is that when they transform, the hood goes all the way back. And the problem is the kid stands up, this folds down, then they go back down, but sometimes the hood does not. And then you see either their father or mother running up real quickly beside them and flipping it closed. Well, we don't want that. We want a really reliable transformation where the costume is basically doing all the transforming on its own. By having this 1-inch edge, when the child stands up, it's enough to be far, far away from their head. It won't be interfering with them, but it's not so far back so that when they go down at about this level, gravity just takes over and pulls it closed. They stand up, it flips back. They go crouch down and it folds down. For me, the only way that I know possible is to make a structure here to keep it from opening all the way. Only having it open like so. We can go ahead and paint all of the pieces first if you like, but ultimately what we're going to do is line everything up, glue it. Now, one thing that you want to make sure when you're using either the fabric or the Velcro is glue the pieces together when it is in the open position. So just to give you an idea of what the car is going to look like, you guys might remember when we were making the front and rear side fenders, we had cut these out. So we're going to use these as guides to help prepare our wheels. To make the rear wheels, we're going to make the rear wheels first. What I did is I took the original piece and I traced around some cardboard, and I gave myself about a 1/2 inch all the way around, and we end up cutting 2 pieces. This is the base under which we're going to attach or construct our rear wheels. Now, the other thing that you guys are going to need to make the wheels is a bunch of 1-inch strips. You're going to have to cut 4 lengths. Actually, this will be just for the rear wheels. If you want to do the front wheels at the same time, we will need a total of 8 strips. And these are 1-inch strips. If you follow the pattern of corrugation, we're going to be folding it along this way. So it's very important that the corrugated pattern is like this. We are going to trace a pattern all the way around. You're going to want to make sure that the wheel sits all the way down. We take our cardboard strips and we take the time to carefully fold along every single corrugated pattern. We'll start from the bottom, always start from the bottom, so that the seam won't be seen by anyone. And what we're going to do, we're going to glue around this pattern. Now, it's important, you don't want to go outside of the line. You actually want to stay just inside of the line. And it's probably helpful, first glue a small section here, let it dry, and then continue gluing all the way around. Also, you're going to want to glue on the inside edge, not the outside edge. The width of this is 6 inches, which is the same diameter of the wheel wells that you cut on the front and rear fenders. Once we have that done, we can take a circular wheel here. This one is also 6 inches in diameter. To match the diameter here, we want to design some kind of a pattern for ourselves. Now here's where you guys can get really creative. You can do some pretty crazy rims if you want. We decided to stay with a basic 5-spoke design, but really the design is limited only by your imagination. A couple measurements here. To make a good wheel, we wanted to have as big of a rim as possible and as thin of a tire as possible. So on a 6-inch wheel, we made the tire 3/4 of an inch. We just take our compass and then you draw all the way around. With a classic 5-spoke, you just do a little bit of math, divide 360 degrees by 5. We mark that off. Might be easier to see on this one here. So we actually first did a center line. I decided that this was about the length of the width of the spoke that I wanted. I don't even know the measurement. I did it completely by eye. So we'll have this little stencil here, which is the same length from the center to the edge. And then we just mark off where we want it. You'll notice there's a center line here. That center line that I drew was the same center line that we determined by splitting the wheel into 5 equal parts. Then we just use those lines to line everything up and then draw some lines. The front wheels actually fold away. They're moving parts. So it's important to make those a little bit smaller. With a 6-inch opening, we decided to make a 5.5-inch front wheel. This is going to help us a couple of ways. First, it's going to allow us to actually make a moving piece that will be able to fold away without getting stuck on anything. Also, 2 of these together, once they fold away, they will both fit nicely inside. Also, most muscle cars always have smaller front wheels compared to the rear wheels. The rear wheels are a little bit bigger, so this will also help with the overall presentation and look of your car. For this, we're going to need a total of 4 pieces. We are going to construct them as standalone units. The thickness of the tire is the same, so that's 3/4 of an inch. And then I used my little guide here. Again, you guys can make whatever pattern you want. Now you only need to draw this pattern for 2 of them. These are the 2 pieces that are going to be on the front. On the back, you don't need to worry so much. One thing that you do need to draw on the back portion of the wheels is you want to mirror this inner circle here, which will be where the rim of the wheel will be. So we'll go ahead, draw those lines. Just as with the rear wheels, the front wheels are also going to need a total of 4 1-inch strips. What we're going to do is build the back of the wheels. Now, we're not going to be attaching to the outside of the wheel because that will mess up the diameter. You want to glue on top and to the edge. Now, with the front section of the wheels, once we've established the general spoke pattern that we want and the thickness of the tire, we're going to turn them over and we are going to also draw a pattern of the rim, and this line will serve as a guide for the inside rim that we are going to construct for the wheels. So after your pattern has been drawn, we can cut out these little triangle sections. When we've cut that out for all of our 4 pieces, then we can attach the inside rim. I usually go, to make it more manageable, I usually do 1 section at a time. That will make sure that you'll have a really nice edge so that this rim is flush with these circular parts. One thing that you want to try to do is make sure that the seam is actually behind one of these spokes. so it's hidden away. Nobody will see exactly where that piece is connected. After our pieces are glued together, then we can go ahead and from the edge, from these little corners here, you just cut them right towards that center dot. So you end up with 5 loose pieces that we're going to push in later, and that's going to give us that nice 3D effect. So the very last bit of construction is you need to cut yourself 4 of these little circles. Now I determined the size of these circles by taking a look at the wheels. We put them together like so, and this will be the central wheel hub. And what I do is I just push them all the way down. That's going to be glued down, but it's going to give us a nice bit of 3D effect or texture. And we want these circles to be just big enough to cover up these pointy parts when it is being pushed down. So you might need to do a little bit of trial and error. You don't want it to be too big, but it should be big enough to cover up most of those pointy sections, so that will create the illusion of this being just one continuous metal piece once it's painted. Also, before we do the final construction, I like to paint the inside before we do the final assembly on the wheels. The reason I do that is because it's going to be extremely difficult for you to get inside with a paintbrush and get a nice even coverage everywhere once everything is glued together. So paint those parts first. We're going to paint the inside here black, and on all 4 of them we're going to paint the inside of the spokes and the rim silver. I just had a flash of creativity. We're always looking for ways to make our costumes better and stand out, and again, it's in the details that you're going to take it over the top. And as happy as I am with the way that our wheels turn out using this method, I've just thought of an even better way to take it that one step further. And that's with these little sticks here. I had a bunch of these sticks hanging around, and what I've done is I made 2 big and 2 small. The big ones, I just use a roll of tape and I traced myself a little circle pattern, and then for the small, here I trace on the outside, and with this one I trace on the inside. If you cut those out and paint them red, you end up with something like this. To anybody who's familiar with automotive, what does that look like, guys? Brake calipers. And we all know that the big sports cars have either bright red or bright yellow brake calipers. Since your car is going to be yellow, I would go with red. You just have that little bit standing out. So yeah, I think we just took it to the next level, guys. When you're making this piece, just make sure that it's smaller than the diameter of than the opening for your inside rim. I was thinking of putting in little white marker Brembo, but I'm tired and I think this will be good enough. So that's something that one of you guys might want to do. Put in a name brand of one of those big brake companies and take it over the top. I guess we can start with one of the small wheels. Now with the small wheels, you've got that seam where the glue is joined, the end of the pieces. I like to keep that on the bottom. There's a less likelihood that anybody's going to see it. We'll put in our little brake calipers and we put in our wheel. So what we want to do, we want to position the brake calipers into one of the corners there. I wouldn't push it all the way to the edge. Leave yourself a little bit of a space so that it will jump out with a black border in between the silver and the red. And just trace around where your final position is going to be. Then we will apply some glue. So we have our brake calipers glued into place, and after waiting just a couple of minutes, we can go ahead and do the final assembly of our wheels. And that kind of gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. Now, with the brake calipers, you very well could paint them if you want. I'm a big fan of texture, so when it's a choice between paint or texture, choose both. You'll end up with a much better result in the end. We take one of our pieces here and decide how we want our wheels oriented. You want to do it in such a way that will also complement the look of the brake pads. Once you glue it, hold around with both of your hands to make sure that you have as much of a circle as possible. One last step is the wheel hub. We're going to apply some glue here and then just push it all the way down, trying to center it as much as possible. And there you go. Once that glue is dry, we just paint everything silver. You don't have to do too perfect a job over here, but do some silver at least, maybe on the first half. Everything else here will also be painted silver. Okay, so we've finished our first wheel. This is one of the back wheels. It just gives you an idea of what the finished product looks like. I'm very happy with the result. We've got a lot of texture, a lot of shadows catching from different angles. The folds in the cardboard gives it a really nice pattern in the metal rim. Just to recap, we painted the silver first and then we painted the tire itself. I generally go for a ratio of 1/4 and 3/4. You definitely want the rim to be nice and thin, and you want it to be a lot thinner than the tires. At the same time, you don't want the tires too thick because it's a sports car and they've got nice low profile tires. But that's generally the look that you're going for. I'm super happy with these brake calipers. I don't know, what do you guys think? Please let me know in your comments if that's a nice upgrade or not. And we just paint everything else black. This is going to be on the inside of the costume. You could paint it black now, or you could paint it after you install it. That's really up to you. So that's it for part 3. In part 4, we will be discussing a little bit of paint, final assembly, attaching the front wheels to the front portion of the costume, and of course, making the helmet. Thanks for watching.